Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L, and now let's talk Centaur Worries, or Centaur no Nayami. I think that's how you pronounce it in Japanese. Anyway, whatever, Centaur, episode 4. We continue the romp that is Centaur, and episode 4 continues its regular patterns, the two halves, and maybe the second half is the one that has something of a bit more interest for the world. So, there is now a pattern, there is a groove for how we watch Centaur. Guys, thanks for tuning in. So let's talk about Centaur. Let's talk about the episode and what it ultimately does. Now, this episode was a little bit interesting in that the first half has some morsels of information that I think are also very valuable. And this time, the first half was more. Well, look, my favorite line in the first half, or my favorite two lines were, "It's better than a cow's," and "It's hairier than I expected." Let's just start it off like that. I like those two lines. Those were hilarious. So this episode was, this first half was offering just more answers for logistics. First off, one of the points that they followed up on from the last episode is the notion of hybrid. Like, they confirmed hybrid. We know that hybrids are a thing, but then they talked about the special rights that hybrids get. And we see the government pamphlet, and they're talking like they want to make sure no one is slighted at all. So the hybrids are guaranteed a better life. There's a talk about how hybrid birth might be difficult for some mothers. Very interesting. I really respect that they did that, because that's just cool, right? You have to deal with these logistics. These are logistical problems. It is cool that the author did think of how to kind of address this. And that's what this the first half of the episode really is. It's logistical problems. And the first episode we end off with the girls looking at each other's vaginas. That's where we end off with this episode. I think, that's interesting. That's very interesting. It's very interesting that it was, at the end of the day, an image issue when it came down to Hime getting a love letter. I think it's very interesting that she did have this kind of self-conscious aspect to herself, that she was worried about it. And it's ultimately, pretty interesting that it came out of her being compared to a cow. That's just funny. I mean, it's also slightly unfortunate, and I'm sure that boy, if the government officials had seen him, he would, or had heard him, he would have been sent to a correctional facility. But it was just interesting that that's where it came out of. And that's like a legitimate worry for a centaur. I would not have thought that maybe seeing a cow's twat would have made you feel kind of uncomfortable about your own if you are a centaur. So that was interesting. That was super interesting. And it was also just really interesting to find out about the logistics. At the end of the day, with that first half, it's just an uncomfortable problem that you could understand the teenage girls in that world, who are centaurs especially, having to come to terms with. I mean, when the bottom half of your body is effectively the size of a cow or a horse, you're gonna have some, image problems. Especially if someone compares you to a horse. I imagine, though, that if someone compares you to a horse, they're going to a correctional facility. I can't imagine that this strict government is gonna let any of that stuff fly. No way, man. This government, please. They're forcing equality on everyone. They're not gonna let that fly. But yeah. So that was a pretty interesting part for that first half. Because other than that, the storyline is just like a guy asked a girl out and she got freaked out. And it ends off with finding out that the guy was commenting on her big chest. Yes, it was her chest. It wasn't anything else on her body. Just saying that she had giant boobs. And that understandably would turn off any girl. So respectable. Ultimately, very respectable. First half, though, still a slice of life. This one just focusing on logistical problems of being a monster girl, or I guess a human girl with a centaur body. Now let's go for the next half of the episode, because this is not as strong as like the other second halves, but this one's still pretty interesting. And this one, the second half, does something in that it fleshes out the Antarticans. And it also introduces a new character that we see in the opening. So when it comes to the second half, we start off, the girls are studying and they're like just helping each other study. Nozomi has to study and whatnot. And I'm waiting. I'm just looking every little spot I can. I want to see where the disturbing aspect of this episode is going to come in from. and I just don't know. I don't see it. I'm getting kind of worried. I'm thinking, well, the first half was better than I expected this week. The first half gave you some more logistical problems solved. Maybe they're not going to do the traditional second half disturbance. I'm thinking that's what's going on. And then the UFO happens. The UFO goes across the screen, and I'm just, yes. Yes, there we go. That's how it's done. And this was the most interesting part. I didn't think that from the UFO they would segue to the race of reptiles that lives in Antarctica. That was weird, man. I did not expect that. And just the general talk about the Antarcticans, there's such a disparity with them that it's just unreal. Like, wow. And let's just point it out. First off, the Antarcticans, the snake people, they are vastly different than all the other races or variations of humans that we've seen. Mostly because the commonality between all the other humans is that they have human faces. The Antarcticans don't. So that's a very interesting commonality. And then they start talking about their technology, that there might be more technology, that they might be more technologically advanced. The UFO kind of plays into that. But they're just talking about it like we really don't know much about the Antarcticans. They're a race of reptiles, but they live in the cold-blooded, and they're like, just a lot of interesting questions are popping up for the Antarcticans. And then I love how they brought in Quetzalcoatl. I think that's how you pronounce it. Quetzalcoatl. I think that's how you pronounce it. Quetzalcoatl. They brought in like the Mayan god, and it's interesting how they made it so that the Mayans in this world also hold these type of beings in regard because they have Quetzalcoatl in their myth. That's pretty interesting. Whenever they can bring together anime and myth and just the history and like make a nice little tie there, that's awesome. I appreciate it. Another interesting thing they said is that the Antarcticans are kind of in a bit of they're not exactly on friendly terms with the Americans. There's some tension there. I like that. I overall really like that. And actually, another point for the Mayans, that's very interesting that the Antarcticans would have gone to South America, but that makes sense because Antarctica and South America are really close together in terms of the tips of the two respective countries. So that's cool. It makes sense how a Antarctican could have ended up in South America, and it makes sense that the South Americans would see them as really important beings when one of the figures in their myth or their religion, I guess for the Mayans in particular at the time, is an Antarctican themselves. So ultimately, I really enjoyed that part. Bringing up the whole thing about their technology, bringing up the way they travel, bringing up their history. That was a pretty good second episode. Not as super disturbing at that point when we were getting just the information unloading, but it was really interesting. I feel I have one more point to say about the Antarcticans. Oh yeah. I think they're a reference to the reptilian theory, like the reptilian conspiracy theory, because I'm pretty sure that the reptilian conspiracy theory says the reptilians live underneath Antarctica. I might be wrong, but I think that's maybe where it's coming from. Anyway, so that second half still doesn't have anything that's overtly disturbing. It's just a nice little history lesson. It's just a nice little session to find out about these people that live in Antarctica. Then you start the day, the girls going to school, and then you realize when Kyoko points it out that there's a few more people walking around, and she points it out because there's a badge, and people can now tell there's a lot of public safety officials out on the road, and it's I was thinking this is because of the UFO. This is because of the UFO. But then when we get into the classroom, after I think Nozomi was the one that talked to one of the officials, I think they were family or friends or something going on there. We end up going into the classroom, and then the teacher is saying, oh yeah, there's going to be a new student. At that point, everyone who's watching this series should be aware the new student is most likely the snake girl in the opening, and that's what we get. Unfortunately, her name is Quetzalcoatl. Yeah, that's what I wrote down. Her name is Quetzalcoatl as well. So she's a namesake. She has the name of, I guess, the hero of the Mayans. So that was cool. The next two halves that are coming up for the next episode are going to be revolving around her from what the episode titles are saying. So that will be pretty interesting. Anyway, Centaur, continues its thing. It continues doing what it does. I like the I like the first half covering a logistical problem in the girls' lives, and I like the second half for being generally disturbing. So overall, pretty awesome stuff. And this I haven't talked about it, but the ending song for Centaur is always so much more epic than what the actual series is about. I hope that we see something that kind of alludes to the problems that we see in the ending, because I think it's a beautiful ending. Like, the song is also very beautiful, and the visuals on the staircase and all that, oh my god, awesome stuff. But it's jarring because Centaur doesn't show any magical elements like that. Centaur seems to be much more rooted in surrealism than it is in fantasy. So, it'll be interesting to see what we end up getting. Yeah, anyway guys, thanks for watching. This was a really fun episode. I really enjoy talking about Centaur just because of how interesting it is. But yeah, guys, let me know what you thought down below if you have anything to say. And yeah, till next time, I hope you have a great day.